just briefly outline the program for today. We have a couple of presentations first, one by Dr. Teodoro Marotta on Facing People's Suffering, the Mission of Health Professionals. And there's another presentation after that by Father Brendan Purcell on the spirituality of unity and suffering. There's a meditation of Chiara Lubick. Each of the talks will be interspersed with songs. Then there's a break, and after the break, we'll be sharing health experiences under the topics of care for everyone, share the other's hurt or joy, be the first to care, let go and be ready to listen, love your enemy, and care for each other. There'll be also opportunities for sharing and dialogue before the conclusion intended at 5 o'clock. So, I'd like to introduce Dr. Teodoro Marotta, who was born in Salerno in Italy and graduated in 1982 in medicine and surgery at the University of Naples in Italy. In 1993, he graduated with a PhD from the University of Naples with the thesis Association between Arterial Hypertension and Other Cardiovascular Risk Factors, Metabolic Aspects and Role of Adrenergic Nervous System. In 1982 to 1998, he actively participated in the diagnosis and treatment of many patients with resistant and complicated hypertension. He's worked in scientific projects of clinical pharmacology and pathophysiology of hypertension, and is currently the consultant of internal medicine for the Italian National Health Service. He's authored many articles and lectures at international meetings and summer schools, and he's particularly interested in the educational activities for students and young professionals focused on ethical issues and professionalism. Teodoro is involved with the Focolare movement, and he's also a member of the association Medicine Dialogue Communion, also known as MDC. This association wants to contribute towards the elaboration of a medical anthropology inspired by the principles of the spirituality of unity that animates the Focolare movement and by related experiences made in different countries. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Marotta.
So nice to meet you. Okay. Okay. Just a bit back. Okay. Because otherwise. Okay. Well, so good afternoon. Nice to meet you, each of you. And many greetings to all of you who are present here and to all the friends who are connected with us from the other cities of Australia and from New Zealand. And first of all, I wish to thank the organizers of this symposium for inviting me here in Melbourne. It is a great honor for me to be here. And as Martin has told, I am here to represent the association Medicine Dialogue Communion, that is an association interested in the dialogue in the field of medicine, cultural dialogue in the field of medicine. And I bring you also the greetings of the Central Commission of the association. And this association, is, as it has been told, is linked to Focolare movement, but also includes people who are not members of the movement. And in fact, our purpose is the cultural dialogue. And of course, dialogue implies differences. So differences in ideas, in vision of life, in religion. So our common ground is the commitment in favor of the humankind in the field of healthcare. And second point, as you have already realized, I need to apologize for the quality of my English, or my pronunciation, but I trust in your comprehension on this point. So let's come to our topic. We know that the patient-physician relationship, to be the topic of my presentation, is usually established in the context of an illness, which is seen with different perspectives from each part. And it has been told that people go to visit their doctor with an illness and come back home with a disease. So illness and disease are two very different ways to see what happens. Actually, the patients need that their physician gives their illness a scientific frame, turning it into a disease, and turning their story in a case history. There are two different things, personal story and a case history. But they need this to access the undoubted benefits of the modern medical science. But this is not enough. So in a study performed in the setting of family care, it has been shown that as many as half of patients' concerns did not come out during the visit, simply because doctors didn't have time to listen to them. And I think this is a personal experience of many of us. So, something wrong? Okay. So in one study, physicians interrupted patients an average of 18 seconds, just 18 seconds, into the patient's description of the presenting problem. And in another study, the time allowed to patients to explain their complaints was just 23 seconds, as you can see. And on the other hand, patients allowed to complete their statement of concerns used just 6 seconds more, just 29 seconds on average, and then those who were redirected before completion of concerns. Indeed, this data, you can see on the bottom of the slide, have been found in Canada and the United States several years ago, but something is not so okay. You can see here that even in recent times and in another environment, here you are in Europe, in Spain, where the visits of 112 family physicians were video recorded for 4 hours, and the average duration of a visit was less than 8 minutes. But let's move out of the room of the family doctor towards another setting, a more dramatic one. So you can see here that we are in Germany in a clinic for breast diseases, and the median duration of the visit in which the diagnosis of breast cancer was disclosed to the patient was what you read here. 15 minutes, just 15. 15 minutes to say hello to the patient, let her sit down, review the clinical documents, disclose the diagnosis, listen to her questions, answer to them. I guess no time to listen to her fears, maybe to her crying, to reassure her, to give her the help she needs. So when patients were asked what they suggested to improve the service, half of them, 51%, answered that doctors should give more time to explanations. And yet we know from this study conducted in Edinburgh, Scotland, that with longer visits, patients are more likely to respond yes to the 6 questions that you can read here. For example, when the visit, after the visit of today, do you feel you are able to cope with life, with your illness? Do you feel you are able to understand your illness, to understand what is useful for your health? Do you feel confident about your health? All these questions, the patients are more likely to respond yes if the visits are longer. But is it only a matter of time? So let's see what has been stated by one of the most respected authorities in the field of cardiovascular disease, the United States Joint National Committee for the Diagnosis and Treatment of High Blood Pressure. That is also my field of interest in science. And this document states that the most effective treatment prescribed by the most careful physician will control high blood pressure only if the patient is motivated, of course. Motivated to what? To take medicines and to establish and maintain a health-promoting lifestyle. It is not easy to follow a diet, to exercise, to quit smoking. So motivation is necessary, and motivation improves when patients have positive experiences with their clinicians and trust them. And empathy builds trust and is a potent motivator. But what is empathy? It has been defined like an ability to understand the patient's experience from his point of view. In other words, to put himself in his shoes. And it also implies that the patient feels himself understood. So we could also say to listen to what the patient means, not only what he or she says. And a strategy has been suggested to physicians and to other health workers, nurses, etc., to help them in building empathetic relationships with their patients. And the first step you can read here is to establish rapport. And to obtain these, the health professionals should let the patient speak and help him, her, to express his or her emotions. Rapport depends on reciprocal respect shown by each one and on interest for each other. Second point, silencing in our mind, the doctor's mind in this case, any comment, any critique, question, and diagnostic reasoning while the patient speaks. Only afterwards it will be convenient to clarify what is unclear in the story and to verify the clinical hypothesis. Third point, trying to access patients' unconscious processes. This will help the doctor to understand what is hidden beyond patients' words and also beyond the patient's silences, and to ask the correct questions aimed at clarifying the diagnosis. Last step, communicating to the patient that we understand him, her, then also that we accept him or her unconditionally. Here, the empathetic process reaches the top and a deep relationship can begin. But I would like to stress the second step, silencing internal talk. Because it is important, the inner silence, an inner silence is necessary to make space to what the patient wants to communicate about him, herself, and his or her experience of illness. This requires to us, to the physician in particular, the labor of temporarily emptying ourselves, at least in a sense, to emptying of our medical knowledge, which could represent also a hindrance to a full communication in some cases. We cannot enter in what another person feels, or better, we cannot leave that another person with his experiences entering us if our mind is occupied by notions, by hypotheses, by templates, schemes. The empathetic listening requires to be free from what we have inside us. Requires to be poor in our interior. Only in this way we can effectively build a relationship. This is a general view of life, and it is fully appropriate for health professions. Telling and listening a story resembles a bridging performance. The way the story is told and its content are conditioned by the listener. If you listen to me now, I can talk, otherwise I could not. And we cannot tell a story 2 times exactly in the same way with different listeners. So as physicians, we travel back and forth across the bridge, taking the patient's story of illness to be retold in the form of a case history that is extracting from the story what makes it similar to other stories of the same disease. It is our duty. But if we do only this, we risk to dehumanize the patient. We do not address him or her as a person, and ultimately, we may very well increase patient suffering. To date, scientific data, teach us that empathy not only increases patients' psychological well-being and satisfaction, but also improves diagnostic accuracy and clinical outcomes. Time just allows me to show you one example taken from the scientific literature and one personal scientific experience. Okay. So the first example concerns the field of serious infectious diseases. And the authors of this study investigated if feeling themselves considered as persons by their own physicians helps patients with HIV, the virus of AIDS patients, help patients to follow the treatment and to attain the effect of the treatment. So, as you can see here, 1,700 patients were interviewed, and they were asked if they felt themselves considered as persons. Some of them answered no, some of them yes. And you can see here in the yellow columns that the proportion of patients who complied with the treatment increased if they felt considered themselves as persons by their physician. And also, in the red columns, you can see the effect of the treatment, that is, the clearance of the virus from plasma. And you can see that the proportion of patients, the number of patients whose virus was cleared from plasma, of course after the treatment, increased significantly in comparison with patients who did not feel themselves considered as persons. So a very hard outcome is linked to a relational element. No, it is the previous one. No. Okay. So in my professional activity, I try to inject empathy in the relationship with the patients. I visit patients in different outpatient clinics, and here I have published some data of patients of 2 clinics in the city of Naples, in deprived districts of the city. And this data refer to patients aged 60 years or more. And despite the cultural level of the patients, they were low socioeconomic level, and their age, and both these elements make particularly difficult to change the uses, the lifestyle of these patients, to motivate them, etc. And you can see that at the end of the observation, the yellow columns, there was a significant improvement in several cardiovascular risk factors: obesity, hypertension, diabetes, and lipid profile, cholesterol, etc. And also, there was a significant decrease in smoking habit that is particularly difficult to obtain. And I believe that these results are linked to the empathetic relationship with the patients. So we have seen what is the role of this physician and also in general of the health professional when a patient seeks his help. Here we can read what the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada requires from a physician. A physician should be not only professionally competent, but also a good communicator. He has to know how to collaborate with other professional figures in the healthcare field, and he has to manage his work, his teamwork, and to make himself a half advocate towards the authorities, the politicians, for example, to be a scholar, and so on. So it is a very demanding picture, but duties, so all these duties are not everything. It has been taught that a duty-based ethics is not a reliable basis for a medical practice. Medical practice is genuinely devoted to the patient interests, which is not supported only by duties, but by virtues. This is an editorial of The Lancet, a major journal in medicine, who supports this concept. The Royal College of Physicians of London has stated that medicine is a vocation, and physicians are committed to integrity, compassion, altruism, all virtues, not duties. And also empathy cannot be reduced to a technique, but should be based on a real ethical attitude. So we could say on love for people. Thus, we have explored the role of health workers. And what about patients? Don't have anything to do? Are they completely passive in this bridging job? I don't think so. I don't know your opinion, but I don't think so. The patient-health professional relationship is a human relationship. Hence, it follows a general rule that is always valid when human beings meet each other. It reaches its full significance when the gift, the listening, the openness are reciprocal. So what is the patient's role? And we could also say, what is the role of each of us when we are patients? Because we cannot forget that all of us, even doctors, or even nurses and other health professionals, have been or will be patients ourselves, sooner or later. We could not escape this. So I think we can identify some points, if I manage to show you them, some points. Okay, first. No. It has disappeared. So the attitudes have disappeared. No, it's not this. Maybe you could go autonomously. forward. Okay. Okay. Just next one. Next one. Okay, this one. Well, we can identify some points in our role as patients, when we are patients. Attitudes. First of all, I think we should bear in mind that in front of us there is a person. Not only we as patients need to be considered as persons, but also the health provider. He is not only a health technician. He or she, like ourselves, needs to be considered as person. The second point, we should take into account his or her working charge, stress, time restraint. We don't have so much time, not for our choice usually, but for the time that our authorities, the time that they leave to us. And also we have shortage in resources sometimes. We could not have at our disposition all what we would like to have to help patients. And this sometimes stresses us. Also, we should consider that even he or she, the health provider, might suffer for personal, familiar, or other reasons that we don't know. And also, finally, remember that other patients are waiting out of the door. We are not the only patient. So, next one, please. To these attitudes follow some actions. Make wise use of doctor's time. Don't waste his time. And for this reason, to prepare in advance, for example, documents. They are simple things, but they are very useful for us. Documents to be showed, diagnostic results, not look in our bag when we are already seated there. And to prepare in advance a list of current treatments with doses, etc. This is an important point, I think, to report symptoms, complaints, fears, avoiding useless reiterations, but reporting what we deem is important. And also to listen to the explanation, not so pleasant experience is when the patient asks you something, you are trying to explain it, and the patient continually interrupts you. So, for example, let the patient speak, but also let the doctor speak. It could be useful. Also, of course, asking clarifications when they are needed. So, it has been told that a good quality patient care, one can obtain good results, requires not only the delivery of an effective treatment, but also good communication, which can motivate the patient through the development of trust. But we could add, the next one please, we could add that healthcare requires building a true interpersonal relationship, a true one. This adds value to the clinical encounter and transforms it in a significant human interaction that can have a real impact on suffering. Next one, please. So, this statement has been stated in an international congress promoted by our association a few years ago. Reciprocity and solidarity between actors of healthcare, patients and providers, can give an effective contribution to a new concept of medicine, a more human concept of medicine. And this could be our conclusion. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Theodora. We'll now go to New Zealand and we'll show a short clip by Anne Murray. Some of us went in New Zealand, that is, to visit her and interview her. And what we're going to see is some parts of a long interview which Anne shares about her mother and herself becoming nurses for the Maori community. Anne is the wife of the late Bill Murray of the Ngāti Apa Wariki Iwi and has been an active member of the Fokolare movement for over 40 years in New Zealand. Anne, at the age of 87, still runs the Māori Time Drop-In Centre at the Te Rao Orewa Murray in Wanganui in New Zealand and was awarded a Queen's Service Medal earlier this year for her unceasing and tireless voluntary service to the Wanagui community. Anne's also received a Wanagui Community Award for services to Christian Social Services in '95 and the River City Press Citizen of the Year Award in 2010. So, a short interview.
Along the riverbank, there were a lot of Māori people, and there were no doctors. And so the women had babies, no one to deliver. So they used to, we say, ring. How mum knew their baby was going to live. Well, we had on the beds and that, she'd rip up. And she'd take pads and all that. So this is the basket comes in.
And what was the kit to use?
The kit took the pads, and anything she wanted, tobacco and everything with her. Money was stuff that she needed. And we used to say to Mum, how do you know? She said, so she'll go on the road and with the basket and not go with my brother. And we were allowed to go there with the papers. But one time we did right up under the bed. And the baby was born, but we couldn't see the baby was crying. She knew we were there. We had to get home before. And so there was a light babies in walking. There was no way to go. And she used to walk and mom. And that's how she knew the river.
When you were older, did you help your mum with any of the deliveries of babies?
No, we weren't allowed to. No. All we did was help her with her baskets and that. Then we'd had the baby crying. Then we knew, oh well, it's time for us to walk home with her. Yeah, sometimes at night. And we said, Mum, you can't go. And my brother would go. Yeah, because those days there weren't many cars around. So it's all either horseback or you walked. So she walked. And then when I got sick, well, I had to leave home, which was terrible. And I had to leave Mum by herself. And so I had to come. I left there. No, I went to hospital 2 years. I was flat on my back with TB. Bed rest, just one pillow. So 2 years went up. They said, right, you're going down to Otaki, to the sanatorium at Otaki. Another 2 years there. And when I was there, I had to have a big operation, and so part of my lung was collapsed. But I grew, and that's where my faith started to build up. It had started at home, but wasn't very good. And then while I was in the hospital, that's where it started to grow. And I thank God for that.
How old were you then?
I was about 16. No, I just started to go to secondary. I was only there a year, and then I had to go into hospital. So I left all that behind. And my poor mum would catch the train and come up to the hospital once a week. That was the saddest part, was having to leave her.
And you nursed, so you were nursing.
Wasn't much of a nurse, but I liked the kids. Because I was sick. And as the patient, his patient. So he said to me, well, I've got a job for you. And I said, what doing? He said, well, nursing in a TB ward here. And that was lovely. So that's how I started here.
Wow.
So that's my history.
Wow.
McLean, and he talks about, he reads a poem that he wrote after the death of his mother, who suffered from Alzheimer's disease for over 15 years. So if we could have that, thank you.
Kia ora, McLean, ko Robert McLean tōku ingoa, ko te whanganui a tara aho. Hello, my name is Robert McLean. I live in Wellington, born and bred, Wellington, New Zealand. And I want to share with you a poem that I wrote for my mother when she died just over a year ago. And it really tries to express the relationship with my mother in something of her life, a real beautiful life. And just to let you know that many years ago now, over 15 years ago, Mum had a number of severe strokes, which left her very disabled, and she had Alzheimer's, dementia, and really required a lot of care. So Mum lived at home. She stayed at her own home in the old house, and my dad looked after her, and we all looked after her too over those many years. So here we go. The poem is called My Runner Mum. And it's written on the 3rd of February in the summer 2015. While my friends at St. Teresa's School, which I went to, appeared to have a normal mother, I had the privilege of having a superhero type mum. Now I can explain why she was a superhero. She was especially super at running, so she used to run everywhere, attest to the short distance, race down the hall for the phone, the regular jump and dash up the stairs to find something on the coffin, the 50-metre race up to the top shop for Auntie's bread, and the 1K, always late again for Mass. She was always late running for Mass. I could prove these abilities to my friends at the annual St. Teresa's Day picnic, when proudly Mum would take out the over 50s running race every time. But like all top athletes, Mum had her performing enhancing secrets, a strict regime that kept her in top condition. There was a healthy diet of home-baked apple jelly jam, watered-down butter. You know, Mum used to, at night, she used to pour in water and milk to make sure the butter goes further or went further, and I guess that's what they did in the old days. Boiled up the tea towels. I'm not too sure why they used to boil tea towels, but they did. 5 kiwi fruit pavs. She used to always make pavs, chicken kouloon, and equal portions of minced potatoes and peas. We pretty much grew up on minced potatoes and peas. For Dad, for us family, for her parish, we continued to chase Mum, not running down the street, but at home to provide daily care, as she did for us in the early days. And this challenge became our greatest race. It is no secret that Mum's secret potion for all of this was a strong faith. She woke us up in the morning with, "My God, I offer thee this day," and ended the day with the prayer, "I lay my body down to sleep. I pray to God my soul will keep." something like that. And interspersed with regular prayers to St. Anthony, St. Anthony because she was always losing things, daily Mass and daily Rosary. And because for my mum, our mum, God was and is the most important thing. And I think that was really true. God was and is the most important thing. And to finish from the words of St. Paul, as for me, my life has already been poured out as an offering, and the time has come for me to depart. I have fought the good fight to the end. I have run the race to the finish. I have kept the faith. Oh, and did I tell you that this race is really a relay? Mum has just passed the baton on to all of us.
Thank you, Anne and Robert in New Zealand. They'll be watching that there and sharing their story. It's a little bit more about chronic disease and disability. So this topic emerged following the workshop entitled Understanding Healing Relationships in Primary Healthcare during the January 2016, where we held 3 workshops. Many attendees commented favourably on these workshops, and particularly in the positive approach that we took or seem to be taking to health and sickness. So I just want to talk about chronic disease and disability. Those 2 words, they have the dis and ease and disability. So you can work that either way, dis and ability. There are 2 words in that, and dis and ease. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with these topics. But the word chronic is often related to an illness or medical condition that's characterised by long duration or frequent recurrence. The word disease can be defined as a condition of the living body or parts of it that impairs normal functioning and is typically manifested by distinguishing signs and symptoms. For example, diabetes and hypertension are considered chronic diseases. The ability to everyday tasks is often compromised with the onset of disease. So disability is often defined as the consequence of an impairment that may be physical, cognitive, mental, sensory, emotional, developmental, or some combination of these that result in restrictions on an individual's ability to participate in what's considered normal in their everyday society, such as processing information, or walking, or writing, or hearing, or seeing. So how common is chronic disease? Well, they're the leading cause of illness, disability and death in Australia. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare published that in 2011, chronic disease accounted for 90% of deaths in Australia. What about the treatment or management of chronic disease? Well, the treatment of these conditions usually requires the requirements of a variety of health services. General practitioners are usually the initial point of contact for people with chronic conditions, and along with other primary and allied health professionals, will commonly manage chronic conditions in collaborative care arrangements. For a number of people, a key step in managing chronic disease involves addressing the modifiable risk factors, such as environmental, social, behavioural and demographic risks. Additionally, there are a range of medicines and surgical treatments available for treating certain chronic diseases. Now I'd like to just change to the New Humanity branch of health in the Focolare movement and unity. The New Humanity branch in the Focolare movement involves everything connected with our life, such as food, health, rest, environment, recreational and sporting activities. It also concerns the whole spectrum of human life, including birth, illness, suffering and death. New humanity includes people of all faiths, non-believers, social, racial and cultural backgrounds. They try to encourage reciprocity in work, projects, discussions and ideas with others through God's love, which brings unity. This way of offering their ideas or their activities renews relationships, environments and structures, even influencing politicians and legislators. So, for example, in researching the healing relationship between healthcare providers and patients, one doctor wrote in his study that indicated that the quality of the relationships created with patients was as important as the pills dispensed. Quotation. Each of us can expect to experience illness, suffering and eventually death as part of our human condition. These human conditions provide many challenges for us as individuals, families and as communities. But there are also opportunities for personal growth as well as for caring and mutual love to flourish. Experience indicates that through these life challenges, it's important to nurture loving, healing relationships and be communitarian, rather than stay independent and alone. The founders of the Focolare movement, Chiara Lubich, said, and I quote, "We should appreciate the great value of sickness and show the greatest respect for our brothers and sisters who are ill. From this point of view, we're committed to carrying out all the works of mercy necessary to help Jesus who is suffering in our neighbour, for instance, taking care of the sick. In this way, the Christian community will also be made visible through this witness of mutual love, which will make society today repeat what the pagans used to say about the first Christians. See how they love one another and are ready to die for each other? So in 6 persons, we have to see a living crucifix, and because they are crucified, they resemble Jesus more than those who are healthy. This is so because the moment in which Jesus expressed the whole of himself was on the cross, and especially when he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The moment in which he emptied himself totally. End of quote. So this symposium, Spirituality of Unity in Chronic Diseases and Disability, will develop these topics in both theory and practice. We hope that you'll be enlightened by the presentations, experiences, and also the artistic sharing, as well as an opportunity to network and share your experience. And so for next, we're going to look at the spirituality a little bit more, and Father Brendan Purcell will had the pleasure and privilege of interviewing him in Sydney last weekend, and we've got that interview here. Father Brendan is an adjunct professor in philosophy at Notre Dame University in Sydney. He studied philosophy at University College in Dublin and theology at the Pontifical University in Rome and psychology at the University of Leuven. He lectured in logic, psychology and philosophical anthropology at the University College in Dublin, retiring as senior lecturer in the School of Philosophy in 2008. He was ordained a priest in Dublin Diocese in 1967, as a present assistant priest at St Mary's Cathedral in Sydney. So he wrote a number of books, but just a few of them. He wrote The Drama of Humanity, Towards a Philosophy of Humanity and History in 1996. And he's also the author of From Big Bang Mystery, Human Origin in the Light of Creation and Evolution in 1992. So I'll now ask Father Brendan some questions on the spirituality of unity and suffering. Hello, Father Brendan.
Hello, Martin. How are you?
Good, thank you. I'd like to ask you a few questions. You've just written a book called Where is God in Suffering? And I'd like to ask you what got you to write it?
Well, it was an Australian. An Australian can take the blame. There's a guy called Peter Singer. He's a prof in Melbourne and also in Princeton. And he wrote an article. I was in a debate with him a few years ago. And what he wrote there, he said, if God is all-knowing, all-powerful and all-good, he could and would have created a world without any suffering. And so it says, if you have to believe in divine creation, we're forced to admit that the God who made the world can't be all-powerful and all-good. He must be either evil or a bungler. Now, that was one thing. So there's a world there. How could a good God allow suffering? Yes. Then there was a debate in Ireland with Stephen Fry, a well-known English TV actor, of course, all that sort of stuff. Yes. And he was asked by the interviewer, if you went to heaven, I know you're an atheist, but if you went to heaven, what would you say going past the pearly gates? And he'd say, what about bone cancer in children? What's all that about? How dare you? He's talking to God. How dare you create a world where there's such misery that's not our fault? It's not right. It's utterly evil. So they were the two kind of things in the back of my mind. Yes. This Australian guy, Peter Singer, and then Stephen Fry. And in fact, they're fair questions. Yes. Why would there be suffering in the world if there's a good God? Why wouldn't he stop it? So that's what got me going.
Yes. Suffering seems part of our lives, and we hear so much from the media, our friends, and also from our personal experiences. So is there a particular suffering that you have gone through yourself? Can you share what struck you and share your insights?
Well, unfortunately, I'm enormously lightheaded, so probably if I had a real suffering, I'd probably forgot about it. As someone said, deep down, I'm very, very superficial. But in fact, I did have. I remember I broke my leg in Chicago. I was in the university there studying on a sabbatical in the 9/11 year, that year, 2001. And I probably was in the museum, in that library, reading about monkey intelligence. And God probably saw me thinking, I'm smarter than that lot. So to give me a little lesson, on the way out of the library, I fell on a step just that high, broke my leg, ended up spread eagle in the University of Chicago hospitals, great hospitals. So while I was there was a bunch of interns, and they were pulling my leg like mad. Now I was looking up, and it's a very secular hospital, okay, but all the kind of panels, the tiles on the top were in crosses. And I thought, I'm not on my own. I'm in there. He was in bad shape too one time. And they were pulling on my leg like mad. And when the superior doctor came in, he begged more or less get out. He should have given him morphine for that. Because I was trying to accept an immunity with this guy up there. And I thanked them afterwards. And they were very grateful. They said, we wish all the patients were like you. Because I was somehow or other getting a bit of backup from Jesus on the cross. So that was that. Then I had another experience, same thing. About a month later, I'm hobbling now on crutches in a little chapel, a day chapel in the bottom of the building I was living in, which is St. Thomas Apostle Parish, just beside the uni. And I did for the only time in my life. Like, I have problems with morality. I never had problems with faith. I'm too stupid to have problems with faith, except that moment. It's a dark November, December evening. I'm walking, I'm wondering, my whole plans are messed up. I was to be in Australia that month. I had to get rid of my ticket. And I'm wondering, is there anything going on there at all? And then I kind of remembered that experience of Jesus on the cross, that was what he went through. And that me being kind of doubting, well, he was a bigger doubter than me, and I honestly really felt I could go on. So I kept going up and down, but with a different heart. Right. So they're the kind of experience. They're not great. I've never had a really... But I have been in hospital for a stroke, for kidney problems. I conked out here a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, because I got an ulcer and I just blacked out completely. Every time I've been in hospital, God obviously realised I'm very tough, stubborn. Every time I'm in hospital, it really brings me back. I found, and I'm not saying it for other people who have much bigger sufferings than me, but whenever I've had these kind of moments, crisis moments, it really has been a time when I really get in connection. Right. So I think, for me, suffering has been a little bit of a door open to God, basically.
Yes. So is there any solution to suffering?
Well, you know, Pope Francis, I always call him St. Francis, but you know what, he was asked that very question in Kenya in November last year. And then he said, there's some questions you can turn around in your minds again and again and never find the answer. How can I see the hand of God in one of life's tragedies? He said, I was going to say that there's just one answer, but no, there's no answer. He said, there is a path. I thought that was really interesting. In other words, suffering is a path. There's no smart answer that will take it away. It's something we've got to try and live. He was sent a little letter. You know, he's got a book coming out for kids letters to him. So a guy called William in America, who's the whole age of 7, and the kid asked him, if you could do one miracle, this to Pope Francis, what would it be? And he said, Dear William, I would heal children. I've never been able to understand why children suffer. It's a mystery to me. I don't have an explanation. Right. So I think the one thing I'd never want to sound as if there's a smart answer. and so on. So that's, if you like, the kind of the biggest thing that I would say in that whole area. But one of the things I thought of when I was writing that little book was I did a chapter on the book of Job. And I thought afterwards, Job goes so far. He's an innocent man who's suffering.
Yes.
And the answer is in the fact that God is still, he wants a dialogue with God. He feels that his friends are saying, because you've done something bad is why you suffered. But he's obviously a good guy. He can't understand it. But eventually gets this interview with God, and God asks him the questions. But I thought afterwards, the Christian answer goes beyond Job. Because the Christian answer, it's again a way, it's not an answer.
Yes.
The Christian answer is that God himself, in Christ, comes down into our sufferings and answers them. But it's our answer, if our way is that God actually shared in our sufferings.
Thank you. What about the topic of this discussion, the spirituality of unity and suffering? Could you explain it on?
Well, I think our answer, the one that I'd be inclined to think of, is one that anyone who knows the Focolare spirituality knows about, but I'll mention it again, which is the time that one of Cara's first companions, Dory Zamboni, that she's really sick, she's got face illness and so on and so forth, and the priest asked her, having brought her communion, when did Jesus suffer the most? Cara thought for a while, maybe the Garden of Gethsemane. He said no when he was on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now again, remember, this is not an answer. But it is Cara's way, and I think anyone who's given it a shot has found out that it's not an ineffectual way. It kind of works, okay? And the example, one of my favourite examples is a friend of mine, an Irish guy called Eddie McCaffrey. So Eddie McCaffrey has muscular dystrophy, or had, okay. So I remember one time, and he's here, he can't move, like he's a lumpy of a guy with a big beard. And when he got his illness first, the doctor told him, even when he was 7, that he wouldn't live into his teens. In fact, he had the worst form, so he should have died statistically at 17. In fact, he lived until he was twice that age, until 30, 31. Part of it was, and this is one of the things that Cara brings out, we don't live Jesus forsaken on our own. It would be impossible to live it on our own. It's too much to think we can manage it on our own. But with people around us, as it were, helping us through that experience, he does become more livable because we're doing it together with our friends. So Eddie's basic friend was his mother. And it wasn't that he's a stepfather. His father had died during the war, just after the war. But basically, he kind of tried to live that. And so I was teaching in the uni. I'll give you a little examples.
Yes.
And there was a guy that I knew was deeply depressed.
Yes.
And so I remember bringing this guy along to see Eddie. And I remember Eddie saying, it's a pity that he doesn't realise that you don't solve problems, you love them. Now I used to scratch my head thinking, what did he mean by that? And then I realised he knew that his problem couldn't be solved. What did love mean? He had so deeply accepted that, for example, when people came to pray over him, praying that he would get his miracle for a miracle,
yes.
He said, I want only what God wants for me. I don't want to be cured if God doesn't want me to be cured.
Yes.
But that was what he meant. You don't solve problems, you love them. It's not a quick answer, but I wouldn't have the right to say that to him, but I think he would have the right to. You know, the guy even wrote a little poem called Courage on a Bicycle. Because there was a guy on his road, nowadays they could probably cure it, and he was born with an enormous hump like that, a smallish guy. And he'd seen that this guy had made a huge effort to get to ride on his bike.
Yes.
And Eddie wasn't thinking of his own courage.
Yes.
He did that for that guy. And when Eddie died, we found the poem, you know what I mean? We didn't even know, but he must have given it to this other guy. But that, like, he could think about. So here is a guy, I remember some of the jokes about him, because he was so cheerful that like, say there was the priest used to bring communion every week, or redemptors. We all took turns.
Yes.
But he used to bring depressed people to him, because you couldn't be more in a worse situation than this guy.
Yes.
Uncurable, going to die in the next 5 years, or whatever. And I remember Eddie saying he thinks I'm a bleeding shrine. Like, you know, I mean, I'm not that good, you know. And at night his mother had to haul him into bed with a crane, because he was a big lump of a guy. And he used to say, Mammy, I'm still in an uncomfortable position, you know. And so then he said, I want that on my tombstone. Here lies Eddie Caffrey. I'm still in an uncomfortable position. And just before he died, a couple of days before he died, he wrote this letter to Mary, to Our Lady. Just to give you an idea of someone living, he really had embraced this experience of Jesus forsaken. He showed me in his own way. I'm not saying I ever had to do it as much as him. How to live that. And it was not being, as Cara says, let's not make him more forsaken than he is. It wasn't a misery experience. It was a happy experience. But this is a letter that he wrote. And he could barely write with a pencil at this stage. What can I say to you? This is to Our Lady. Words seem to only spoil everything because your life speaks for itself. why am I writing to you? I can't answer even that. He says, I'm becoming nothing. I know that you're not surprised to receive this letter, but who else could I write to about nothingness but the expert on nothingness, yourself? Because Mary, in a way, was living Jesus forsaken the first, before anyone else. By losing him, she's united with him. He's losing the Father, she's losing him. They're separated. They can't touch each other. And yet somehow they're utterly united in losing everything. So that's why he calls her the expert on nothingness. And again, it's not a kind of a Christian dodge that you get away. I mean, the guy wasn't getting better. He was dying when he wrote this. He didn't know it. He died about a week later. Then I want to tell, I'm happy to be nothing, because it gives me the chance to be a little like you. You who in your lowliness chose the hidden way with the yes the word has never heard and will never hear again. What else could I be but happy with a chance to be a part of this, an open flower, an immense sea of new creation? So here's a guy really suffering physically, even in danger of losing, I don't know how he eventually died. Maybe he couldn't even breathe at the end. And so when his funeral came up, and it was on the 3rd of December 1979, so a long time ago, I remember I was up on the altar with a few other priests and so on, and a butterfly came up. Now, we get butterflies in the summertime. Yes. And everyone saw it, and we figured he was no longer in an uncomfortable position. Because we figured the butterfly was probably in the flowers, in the front, and the heat probably woke it up, But I'm just trying to say, that would be, if I was asked, what's the way? I think, in a way, Cara showed us a way, which is how to live that. But not, as I said, making it worse, not taking it away, but giving us a way to live it.
Thank you for explaining that. Does the spirituality of unity have a special approach towards suffering?
Well, there is a kind of a way that Cara has invented for us, which is called hide and seek. Now, it's not that it's a game, but in other words, when I have something wrong, headache, broken leg, whatever it is, depression, whatever is getting me, that can be a name for Jesus on the cross. Remember, she said, if I got a dictionary and got all the negative things out, every one of those words would be a name for him, because not one of them doesn't hit sin, for example. I'm in sin, I'm depressed because I'm in sin. That's a spiritual suffering, not a physical one. No, but there's nothing that's there. And so I think, for a way, this is a lovely example. There's a girl called Erin MacDonald from London. And this is only a year ago we got this news. She had a brain cancer, and so they developed with the tumour. Then she was going to get some operation on her face, but then the tumour starts growing again. But this brings out really well how we try to live this together, because we know this experience through her mother. Her dad is not really a believer, but he says, I kind of believe when I've seen what the prayers of all these people around us are doing. So what the prayers were doing were not curing her, but they were helping Erin to deal with it in a stronger way. She belonged to a group in the movement called Gen 4, which is young girls of a certain age, from 5 up to 9 or 10 or something like that. So they were around her. So she's in hospital. They're visiting her, the Great Ormond Hospital in London, Great Ormond Street Hospital, and she's delighted to play around with her friends. They're really making it an awful lot easier for her. And then one of the things that she wrote, they were saying how happy it was for them. But one of the things that she said, she asked her mother, she said, would an X-ray show Jesus inside? So she's so convinced that he's there. And then one evening before she went to sleep, but to give you an idea how a 6-year-old kid can live this, it's not a spirituality just for old guys, you know what I mean, or for older folk like us. And she said she could hear a voice in her heart, and it was Jesus. And when he asked what she said, keep loving. That's what. And then she wrote this beautiful poem here, which I really like. This is, I think she's still well. I haven't heard the whole back up on it. But she said this is when she's, again, 6 years old. Sky shines bright in my heart. It's always safe. Love is the thing. It's importanter than everything. Don't forget that. Love is importanter than everything. If you love, Jesus is there. And I've learned now to love all the time. When things are hard, put up with it. Love all the time. So that's the kind of, here she's doing it in her way, but she's supported by her mother. She's supported by her playmates who are belong to the Gen 4. But I have to tell you my favourite one. And this woman I told you about, Dory Zamboni, she had this face thing, and that's when the priest asked Cara Lubig, how do you deal with that? And Cara's whole experience of Jesus Forsaken came from that. And the hide and seek is that you have a suffering, you give it a name, and all of a sudden you discover it's a name for him. So you've discovered him in the suffering. The suffering doesn't go away like magic, but you're now with him in it, and he's with you. But I remember in Ireland one time she came. It's a funny situation. It was in the Girls' Folk in Ireland, and it was only for women. But because I was a priest or whatever, they let me in. So I was sitting in a table under tablecloth, hiding, unofficially present. And so she made some remark, and you know, I'm rather easily amused, I'm very unlike Queen Victoria, and so on. So she made some, and then they heard the laugh, and so who's in there? And so, but I always remember that night. It was just for fun and all that stuff. But one of the Jen girls there asked her, what was your most recent experience of Jesus Forsaken? And she'd been in hospital in Brussels, and whatever treatment she was getting, the side effects of the medicine made her deeply depressed, to the point that she wondered, was her whole life a waste of time? Had she given it up to a whole mirage? And so on. And it was a very depressing hospital. And so there was a woman in a bed beside her dying, and she tried to unite that woman's cries with Jesus on the cross, praying for her. She actually died that night. But then she got the name of her own suffering, which I've never heard from anyone else, and I've often spoke about it, but I put it in here now because there's no harm to have it, which was a why without an answer. That when Jesus cried out on the cross, he didn't, like at other times of his life, got a big thunderclap, the voice from the Father, this is my beloved Son. He never got any answer to that why. Okay, he went beyond it, we know, by saying, into your hands I command my spirit. And that was her experience. For days and days she had experienced a kind of despair as of why without an answer, partly induced by the illness and the treatment and so on. And I've always, that's, if that can help me, if there's a moment in my life where there's no answer, and I remember when Jesus chose to be like me in that moment, I'm with him. I say, it doesn't abolish it, but it certainly changes the way I can experience it.
Thank you. What about the suffering caused by the action of bad, criminal or immoral behaviour by people? Where is God in this kind of suffering?
Yeah, that's the toughest one. I mean, we can deal with suffering from natural disasters. I worked through that in the book. Things like tsunamis. Can you believe it? The earth needs tsunamis. It's almost like breathing. It needs earthquakes. If you're a big rocky planet, Ios, if you want to stay together, you've got to have some room to blow out. And that's part of God's plan for the world. The same with animal suffering. Animals have to, if you don't want animals to cause suffering to one another, for example, if you want to have polar bears, you've got to have salmon. If you don't want any animals preying on other animals, then stay at the level of bacteria. Surprise, surprise, bacteria eat each other up too. You know this. So in other words, part of the plan of God we don't necessarily understand, but it does include suffering, including the physical suffering of the people we've mentioned. The hardest one is the moral suffering. And the way I handle that for myself is two families that I got to know. One was a couple I knew in Brussels years ago. It was in the early 70s, so a long time ago now, but I've never forgotten it. And they were never going to have a child, because if we have a child, there's a danger of a nuclear holocaust. There was a big thing on people's minds then. And okay, we won't have a child then. And I remember trying to work it out with them and thinking, well look, God has taken a risk by creating beings who can actually screw things up badly. So that's a risk God has decided to take. If he doesn't take that risk and stays at the level of bacteria or chemicals, there will be no evil in the world, because it's not God that causes the evil, it's us that cause the evil. Okay, you know what St. Thomas Aquinas says, boring footnote. He says, anything God wants, wills, has to happen. Anything God wants not to happen, can't happen. So what about evil? Where does that come in? And he says, God doesn't want evil, obviously, because he's good. He doesn't want it not to happen because he's allowing it, but he permits it. And the way I do that is the second example. A family I know who, through the Focolare, but one of the sisters, again, this is going back to the same time, 60s, and late 60s. And this girl had been a Jen, had been in the Focolare, and then she had great idealism. So at that time, the most idealistic group seemed to be on the far left. A bit like the Red Brigades in Italy, but maybe not exactly them. But she was living in a commune in Milan with these people who were kind of communists. Okay. And they did cheerful things like having a pro-abortion demo in the beautiful Duomo in the cathedral in Milan, that sort of stuff. But her parents, because they really wanted to love their daughter to the very end, she was the only one in the group who still was in touch with her family. And so she could come home on the weekends with her washing or whatever. Yes. And one time she asked her dad, she said, "Dad, do you think I should stay with this group?" They can imagine, she was about 22, okay. He couldn't just say, get out of it. But obviously he wanted her to leave. It was dangerous to be in the group because there were right-wingers, kind of neo-fascist groups who were shooting their group. Yes. They knew if they could get them, they'd kill them. It was, in every way it was a disaster. And yet he felt, as a father, I have to give her something she can work with. Yes. So he said, look, you remember you had an ideal as a younger person that everything you did had to come out of self-sacrificing love. If you're certain that being in this group is the way to do that, all I can say is stay with them. Now, it broke his heart to say this,
Yes.
but he still felt he should say it. And she said, okay, Dad, and she, I think, felt he respected her. And so she stayed with the group for a year longer. Then she found out they weren't working from self-sacrificing love. The money they were putting in common, they were stealing, they were trying to push their own political careers. It was not all this high idealism that she had thought about. So she pulled out of it then. So what did he do? It's more like God. In the first case, you could say, to stop anything going wrong, we won't have any children. We won't have any human beings, God could say, you know. In the second one, God says, it's better to have human beings because surely some of them can love, some of them can grow, some of them can become united with me, some are free to reject me. And the Father, in the second case, was that kind of, more like God. And parents all the time have got that experience. It's better to permit your children at a certain age, you can't stop them, but better to permit them even though it's bad. For example, your children are doing something you want, they're now at an adult age, you can't physically lock them up. You might like to do it, but you have to give them that freedom. So I think that's the way I'd handle it.
Thank you very much, Father
You're
Brendan.
very welcome, Aaron. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
That's great, thank you. How are we doing?
We thank Father Brendan. He'll be listening in Sydney, and he'll be watching this in Sydney, as well, so with the group there. So we're going to have a little change now to, as soon as the slide comes up, some of you will know this artist. His name is Lei Kwok Hung. He's a 62-year-old Chinese artist. He may well be a contemporary Silk Road. He's an untiring traveller through his art. Hung attests to his belief in an ever better and more beautiful human race founded on respectful reciprocity practiced at all levels. And this sculpture is called The Queen on Her Throne. It's made from metal, and I'll quote him. He said that, I knew that this visit to Seoul University Hospital would be the last. The 300 miles from Tagua in the south of South Korea were nothing to me. I was going to visit Agatha, mother of one of my dearest friends in that country. For a year she'd been suffering from cancer. I always felt good with her because as an authentic Christian, she was an example to me of how to love without measure. After I pushed her in her wheelchair around the hospital garden and attended to her minor needs, we sat down and faced each other in silence. Time stopped. In my many journeys around the world, I've had 100 other adoptive mothers and fathers, but still today, even though we are on two different continents, I'm still touched by Agatha's particular gracefulness. I'm branded by that real image of a person who knew how to love and to suffer. Now go to a music appreciation, artistic piece.
Hi, I'm Teresa Tan from Perth, Western Australia. This is a Chinese musical instrument called Wuzhang. I'm going to play a song called High Mountains and Flowing Rivers.
we thank Teresa from Perth. Music, as in music therapy, is used. It bypasses the conscious mind and taps into the subconscious. And certainly for me, I could see the turbulent rain or water coming from the snow and eventually through its eddies and currents going into the ocean. So thank you, Teresa. We're now going to have a small change again to Meditation of Kiara by Hannah from New Zealand. Is Hannah here to read the... Thank you. And Stephen. Good.
The world's cultures interpret illness in a variety of ways.
In Asia and Africa, there is a deeply rooted idea that it is a break in the harmony between body and soul, so it always carries spiritual meaning.
In Hinduism, sickness is seen as punishment for the guilty, yet it is also a way to a deeper contact with God.
In Buddhism, disease helps people to understand the precariousness of human existence and stimulates spiritual awakening.
In African cultures, pain traditionally has religious connotations, so prayer, sacrifices and offerings, in addition to medicine, are fundamental for healing.
Contemporary Western culture is based on scientific and technological progress. As a result, life has become a maddening race to maximize everything in life, with the risk of reducing its worth to just pleasure and affluence.
You can see more and more unease in medicine today, so a number of trends have taken hold that are aimed at putting the whole person back in the center of things.
This holistic view includes a psychological, physical, and, for those who believe in the transcendent, spiritual unity. Yet, due to their anthropological preconceptions, these trends still start from a kind of dualism. They see the body, with its organs and systems, as detached from that extraordinary, united reality that a person is.
They also overlook the fact that personal religious beliefs regarding disease and suffering can contribute valid ways of facing and managing it more efficiently, with positive results from a medical perspective too.
How do Christians see the sick and the suffering? When Christ personified them in such a tragic way on the cross, he bestowed on them the highest value and gave them their full meaning.
And how do we see them, attracted as we are by a renewed, authentic Christianity? Unfortunately, even as we work and rejoice as a living gospel spreads, we are often tempted to view those who are sick as misfortunate cases to cure, to visit, to help, until they can return to full activity. It is as if this were our primary duty, central to our way of living.
Instead, no. Those among us who suffer or fall sick must find their rightful place within the hierarchy of love in our hearts. Where they are is where they are most effective, just as the crucified Christ was. Those who suffer then are people who, if they unite their suffering to Christ's, gives the greatest contributions to building the kingdom of heaven on earth. Kiara Lubick.
Next, we have a song by Judith on the Pearl of Light, and then we'll have a short break. So.
When everything goes wrong, when I can't even raise a smile, when I reach my wit's end and find I have to go another, when nothing works out right, no matter how hard I try, when I shake my fist at the night and shout a God-forsaken why. You're the pearl of light in my shell of darkness. I'd give everything that I own just to be with you. Oh, precious pearl, oh, pearl of great price. I'll do whatever I have to just to be with you. When the flood is rising, when the clouds are dark, when I feel like a Noah standing in the storm without an ark, when I'm doing time in my homemade jail, where the bricks in the wall are all the times I've meant to love but failed. You're the pearl of light in my shell of darkness. I'd give everything that I own just to be with you. Oh, precious pearl, I'll do whatever I have to just to be with you. Arms, I'm torn apart, and just like you mean me to, I catch a glimpse of you through the hole in my heart. Just a momentary glimpse of your blinding light. Just a chance to see your face leads me to embrace the darkness of the night. You're the pearl of light in my shell of darkness. I'd give everything that I own just to be with you. Oh, precious pearl, oh, pearl of great price. I'll do whatever I have to just to be with you. To my constant amazement, in every suffering I go through, as soon as I embrace it, I find I'm face to face with you, with you, with you. You're the flame in the eyes, you're the flower in the snow, you're the yes that's hidden in the heart of every no. You're the pearl of light in my shell of darkness. I'd give everything that I own just to be with you. Oh, precious pearl, oh, pearl of great price. I'll do whatever I have to just to be with you. I'll do whatever I have to just to be with you.
Thank you, Judith and the team. We're now going to have a break until 3:25. Back here in the hall, please. There will be a cup of tea and coffee available, and as well as an opportunity to network and share your experiences. So after the break, we'll be hearing specific experiences based on aspects of the Cube of Love for Health. And those of you who are interested in it, there's actually a physical Cube of Love here with the words on it. So we'll hear more about that later. Please do not forget to leave a donation for this event as well at the front desk. This is a cost recovery exercise, this one, so it would be of help. There's also a bookshop at the back with books available. The story of Blessed Chiara Luce is one book. There's also a video of this person. Sorry, I'll hold that up. This is a young 18-year-old who talks about her life, and she passed away, I think, in October 1990 after a severe illness. It's a wonderful story, and she's now been declared blessed. So there's also a copy of the sermon available by Pope Francis that he gave on the 12th of June in 2016, entitled Jubilee for the Sick and Persons with Disabilities. So it's this piece of paper there. It's worth a read. There's plenty of copies there at the back. So Father Brendan talked about his new book. It's not just quite available, but there's an advertising blurb. His book, the title is Where is God in Suffering? There's another book there on health, Soul Matters, The Spiritual Dimension Within Healthcare by Mabel Agudino. So there's plenty there, and enjoy your break. I'll see you here at 3:25. Thank you. We mentioned, Father Brendan mentioned Brendan McCaffrey. There's a book there available in a bookshop as well. Thank you.
Hi.